All right, hey everybody. So this is Josh Bruce, and today we're going to be talking about cameras, specifically the cameras that I use to do this. So I actually have two, and they're basically the Logitech C922 Pros, I think, which came out in like 2016. And I got these off of a recommendation from I want to say partially Alpha Gamer. At least I think that's his YouTube channel. But basically, because I'd started doing more stuff on Twitch or creating more video-based content, and initially it was screencasts, right? So if you go to the history of this channel, you can see me doing dev work, and I probably will start doing dev work again and posting it. But right now, this seems to be where my head's at because studio refresh, right? And as I was doing that, I realized that, it wasn't really going anywhere with regard to engagement with an audience. So I wasn't sure if people were getting value out of that sort of a thing. And I decided to hop onto Twitch and do the same thing because I'd seen some folks who travel in development circles in IT and agile software development who are also doing, what's called like live coding. And so I did that pretty heavily for a little bit. And then, and with that, I was using the webcam on the laptop itself, which of course is very grainy and nasty looking, which is not that big of a deal when you're just testing the waters to see what's going on. And I also noticed that, because I do a lot of stuff. So anyway, I also do productivity coaching. And one of the recommendations or some feedback that I got from one of my clients was that with the webcam being tilted down, it really made me look like I was this sort of big, imposing figure. And this is another something that Alpha Gaming talks about is the concept of keeping the camera roughly eye level. But if I was going to do that, given my current setup and everything like that, it wasn't going to be with the equipment that I had. So that's what made me decide to go out and get some cameras. Now, I did also get the Logitech. God, I can't even remember what this one is. Mainly because it was less expensive than the 922, but it's a 720p, which is basically what the webcam is. And so if this was being used as the camera down at the bottom, then we'd probably be okay. But anyway, eventually got into the 922. I appreciate the hardware a lot, and I'm kind of that way with Logitech in general. So I was first introduced to Logitech, I think, in the late 90s with a TrackMan trackball, and it was a wired mouse essentially, but it wasn't a mouse. You could just lay your hand on there and move your thumb, and I really appreciated that. And then when I was doing, when I gave my first talk, I had a presentation, and I decided to get the presentation wand, and we'll probably save this for another video. And I really do appreciate this. And so I said, okay, well, I know Logitech, and I kind of appreciate them, at least most of their hardware. And the features of the presentation wand, like the software that comes with it, I appreciate that as well. So anyway, I started looking into the 922, and it shoots at 1080. I don't, and some of that has to do with whether or not the video card can handle it and how much I can adjust things. And anyway, I appreciate that it can tilt, so you can actually adjust it this way. The lock is actually really a nice concept because it just sort of folds out, and it has rubber padding here. So you place this on the front of your monitor, and then basically no matter what you have with regard to a monitor, as long as it's a panel monitor, you can get it to stay there, right? But if you saw the work surfaces video that we shot, you kind of see where that ended up. And so now I've got, I have the camera basically attached to a light, a stand-up lamp. So anyway, So that's nice. Some drawbacks or the downsides, it uses USB-A. I think that's what this is called, where basically the connector type, but it's USB 3, I think. USB 2 or 3 speed, can't remember. And that's sort of where the problem started to come into play. If you've watched the laptop videos with regard to the hubs, this is one of the reasons I had to get hubs, because the MacBook Pro, or the 2019 MacBook Pro 16-inch, doesn't come with any USB-As. They're all USB-C. Specifically, they're Thunderbolt 3, right? So they can handle a lot more data transfer. And when I first started plugging these in, I was having all sorts of problems. There was really bad lag. I know in some of the videos I still have that problem, right? Because I'm still dialing everything in. But basically, the video gets ahead of the audio, which is typically more easy for us to see versus the video getting behind the audio. There's a great Veritasium video on that, actually. But anyway, so I needed to figure out a way to plug these in. And the hub apparently was a problem because it basically slows down the data transfer, right? So I was still getting that lag. And I was also getting problems with my laptop due to the hubs. And so what I ended up doing is I picked up, hang on. So I picked up this portable hub because, again, part of the studio refresh is that some of the stuff that's in the studio is going to stay here, but the majority of it I need to be able to take with me. And so I got this. And basically this actually these are Thunderbolt 3, at least because the lightning goes to the phone, right? So Thunderbolt 3. And what I wanted to be able to do is I wanted to be able to plug in the USB-C 3 and then go to the Thunderbolt. On top of that, though, I wanted to be able to connect both of these cameras because I have two C922s, because I wanted to have like a top down, but then also still have the video and have a setup that had the display. So basically you could see on the display and you could still see me talking. So there's that little bit more engagement. And you could also see what I was doing on the laptop, depending on where you wanted to have your focus. So that's one of the reasons that I got this. This seems to be intermittent as well with regard to how well it works. So, and I also have some external hard drives that I ended up using. So I ended up getting this dongle, and I can't remember who makes this. Oh, Belkin. So it's basically just USB 3 to USB-C, right? So then what I can do is just plug this in, and it's as close to the connection as I can get it to be. And then all hell broke loose, mainly because of the software. The hardware seems perfectly legit. Unfortunately, unlike a camera with a lens or a mirrorless camera or something like that, I can't do anything, right? I can only adjust how this is tilted, how it's anchored. It does come with a tripod adapter, so I really appreciate that because I can just connect that to the swing arm. Let's go ahead and swing that into view. I can just connect it to this and basically have it be my top down, right? So hardware, perfectly legit. I really appreciate it. And then got into the software and it just started kind of falling apart from there. So with that said, let's go ahead and switch over to talking about software. Okay, so the one that we're looking at right now is the, what is it called? This one is the Logitech G Hub. And basically what you do is you come back here and you can see the camera that you have connected. Now, the problem that I ran into and why I decided that I didn't want to use this software was because I could not connect to C922 Pros. I could connect the 310, I think this is, but I couldn't connect the other C922 and have it be a different profile, because with the top down, I need the color correction and things like that to be a little bit different, or I want it to be a little bit different. But I can't do that with this software because it can only have one thing connected to it at a time, which, you know, is actually fine, because trying to connect both, you know, having a top down and having the face and doing the display is too much for my laptop to handle in one shot. It's just too much information, especially with the audio coming in. So basically I get laggy somewhere, and I've decided to try to abandon that. But with that said, we can go here and basically see, you can create profiles. And this is what where this shines, right? This bit of software, where it shines, is the fact that you can create profiles. So they have, you know, standard issue profiles, like this would be a streaming profile. And you can see it's a little bit darker. We could do a video call. It really brightens up the room. The defaults, which, you know, doesn't really change much from the video call. This is the top down, so it's, you know, a little bit darker. And then we also have this, and I don't know how to change the names. Like, I haven't figured that out yet. There we go. So we'll do that later. But once you create the new profile, you can go in here and start messing with things. So I always, this is something that I learned back when I was a photo major, is I turn off all the auto stuff, because I really want to try to compose the shot the best I can with the equipment that I'm using. And so with autofocus, it can become problematic with regard to what layer am I focusing on, because right now we have multiple layers, right? So we've got the monitor here, we have me, of course, and then we have the background, and it's like, where do I focus? And it keeps jumping around, and I was just like, nope, we're just going to put it take off auto and put the focus back as far as we can, which is actually, I am technically out of focus, because the camera, even though it's focused as far out as it can get, it will drop off at about, I want to say about 2-3 feet, but it's not as bad as it would be otherwise. The auto exposure, right? If I turn on auto exposure, you can see that, you know, not much really changes. We can also, but what irritates me here is that I don't have a percentage, right? And the same thing with focus. And we'll see this later. Basically, I have these cards that tell me what settings to be at. So that means that when I'm sliding this thing around and I get to the exposure I like, you know, I basically have to tell myself it's under the O, right? Like, slide it to the under the O position. Luckily, we have these profiles, and once I get it there, it's not going to really matter, or it shouldn't matter. But we can tell to prioritize frame rate or exposure. I typically go with frame rate, just because I don't want to drop frames, and I want it to be able to take on, use as much of the video camera as I can, or video card as I can. Under the video settings, this is where we actually can change things like brightness and contrast, right? So if exposure is the ISO, right? Or maybe no, let's say that the exposure is how long the shutter speed is going to be, right? So this software is actually not the best one to talk about for that. We'll wait till we look at the other one. So exposure basically is, I do want to say that it's kind of like the ISO of the film that you're using. So in basically, the higher, when it comes to ISO, the lower the number, the less light you need. The higher the number, the more light you need. Okay. So there are only there's 3 other ways that you can get light into the camera at that point, right? After ISO of the film itself. You have the aperture, which also is what creates depth of field. And then you have the shutter speed, which is how long is the shutter open, how long is the shutter exposing the film to light, if there were film. In this case, it's a digital sensor, right? And then we also have the amount of lights that are in the scene and how bright they are. And generally, depending on what you're trying to do, you want to go with adjusting the ISO, or choosing the ISO, choosing the lights, like adjusting the lights, adjusting the aperture, and then figuring out your frame rate from there. At least in my mind. So if we're doing like a sports shot, for example, where we want everything to be crisp and clean and no like blurriness or trails or anything like that, we need to have a really fast ISO, which is also going to be more grainy, right? So we're generally going to have a faster ISO speed film unless we can control the lights. If we can control the lights, okay, no, just dump as much light as you can on that and then bring the ISO back down, right? Because it's going to be less grainy. So then also, like, say we want to have a really short depth of field. Well, that's going to have, I can't remember if it's less light or more light, but anyway, you get the idea. You play with stuff. So exposure does seem to be mainly affecting the ISO, like that graininess and that sort of a thing. And because if we turn it up, let's go over here. If we really overexpose me, it starts to get really grainy, right? Like I mean, you probably can't see my face. So let's turn this down a skosh. Yeah, so you can see it's a little grainy. It's not too bad. I think that's probably because of the other settings, but mainly you're probably going to see it on the side of the monitor here, where it's kind of like flickering multiple colors. So, but if we turn this down to there's going to be less grain. So anyway, meanwhile, brightness, on the other hand, is more like adding black and removing black, like adjusting the tint and shade across the bar. So it's basically going to be more like, what's the darkest dark, what's the lightest light that we can get. So if we go down here where brightness is almost, well, brightness is at 0, you can see that it's more across the board. It's a flat changing of the colors. And if we come up here, again, it's this, I'm adding the same amount of white to the entire image. And so I think, what did I have this at? 45. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay. And then contrast is basically going to be trying to outline various areas of the image. Sharpness, I don't know why that's at 49. Let's go to 50. And oh, I didn't know you could actually change them over here. Great. That's good to know. So then we have white balance. And white balance is basically going to go from, on the far left, it's going to be more blue, and on the far right, it's going to be more yellow. And again, notice that we don't have any numbers, so I kind of have to go somewhere between A and L, right? But if I go all the way down here to the W, you can see the whole screen just kind of went blue, right? Because we're turning up, we're amplifying the brightness of the blue channel. If we go all the way on the other side, we're amplifying the orange, right? So this is the tungsten kind of situation. For most of my videos, I do try to lean a little bit more on the blue-ish side, which sort of, yeah, it just helps contrast between the yellow light that I have coming here that makes me a little bit warmer, the blue light that's behind me that makes the background a little bit blue, because this is pretty much, I think, almost pure white walls, actually. And so putting it here, helps put the contrast more toward the front of the scene, as it were. Saturation is just going to change the color space, color profile, that sort of a thing. And then we have anti-flicker. So basically, if I have a 60 hertz monitor and I'm shooting it at 60 hertz, that's where you get kind of these bands, right? I think the last movie that I actually saw that really highlighted it was War Games, or watch the original Tron. I think it has something in there. But if I change it to 50, right, where the camera's picking up on 50 hertz and shooting a 60 hertz, that offset is going to make it so that flicker disappears. So there you go. And like I said, the big thing that the Logitech G Hub has going for itself is this concept of profiles. So I can basically say, this is the face camera setting. I can come over here and I can say, yeah, and so you see this is brighter, right? Because this is the top down. So I can say top down. Let's go ahead and switch back to face, and I can do the same thing over here. We're new camera mode. This is for top down. And this is for face. And the thing about it is like you can see it feels kind of inconsistent, right? Like, was it always like that? Let's move this up here. That was the only setting I really changed. So like I said, still dialing it in. And you may have noticed that in my other videos. And that's because when it comes to Logitech cameras, this is the part that's really frustrating as far as an experience goes, right? So the Logitech G hub or gaming hub is not the only software. So let's go ahead and do Logitech gaming software. Now here's the interesting part, and I actually did tweet out to them to kind of, I probably could have been nicer, but I wasn't mean. I was just kind of like, I don't understand why is it like this? So anyway, so the Logitech gaming software, and I also reached out to support. I mean, you guys know me. I usually don't just come on and rant about things. So Logitech gaming software does individual, right? Actually does the individual stuff, right? So individual things that are plugged in. And so we still have the same two settings. And of course my zoom is like broken. I had zoom working at some point, and like the tilt and the pan also not really working. And a lot of times when I launch it, like I get nothing inside of here. The controls are gone. So that's fun. Same thing over here on video settings, but you really don't have to go to video settings unless you want to do like, you know, cartoon, which doesn't look like it's working. Let me go ahead and close this. Close both of those. Okay. But yeah, normally what I end up having to do is log out of this profile and on my computer and then come back. And I might do that, but you know, who knows? The point being, I don't have the controls here, right? And there are some controls that exist here that don't exist over on the G Hub stuff, right? There's two in particular, or one in particular called gain. And what it looks like with gain, what gain does is gain is actually the ISO stuff. So if you turn gain all the way up, it gets really grainy, but at the same time, in low light situations, it looks fine, right? Whereas if you turn the gain all the way down, the graininess goes away. Then you have exposure, which is a little bit more, what feels like a little bit more akin to shutter speed. And because if I end up sliding exposure all the way to the right to turn it all the way up, all of a sudden I'm moving. I'm like, there's a lot more data coming in or something. Like something's just weird there. But the graininess doesn't exist. It's just light. But it's not like the brightness where I'm literally just upping the amplitude of each one of those pixels across the board. So it's just really strange. And P.S. I don't have the ability to make profiles here, right? Like I can't set this to be something, right? And if the cameras are constantly plugged in, because a lot of streamers will have an actual like streaming device and then they have the device that they're playing on, and then it feeds through and then goes out. And so they would never really disconnect their stuff. I'm disconnecting stuff all the time. And so that's why I have these little cards that basically tell me, okay, when you plug in the camera, go to and use the gaming software, set zoom to this, set no, what was this? And sorry, I'm using the wrong view, but set auto to no, set the white balance slider to this point, because again, there aren't numbers. Set the gain to this point, because again, there aren't numbers. But yeah, it's crazy. Like I can't just like hop in here, plug in my cameras, and have everything just work. There's always some setup. And when there's the more setup that exists to get to what you're trying to accomplish, the less likely you are to actually do it, right? That goes back to the experience design rule that I think we've talked about before. Make the things you want people to do easy, make the things you don't want them to do difficult, right? And so every time I would come to film something, I would come in here, go to the advanced settings, slide all the sliders, hit save, and then, do what I need to do. But I can't do that consistently. That's also one of the reasons that I switched over to the Logitech G Hub. And also because my computer apparently can't handle that much data coming through on the video score. So then I was reading through some forums because I'm like, man, there's got to be, like, I'm really trying to understand this. And all of a sudden I got word of another piece of software that has to do with shooting video. And it's called Logitech Capture. So with Logitech Capture, you can kind of see there's our source, and we can do the screens, right? So it's starting to feel a little bit more like OBS, because I can also change source 1, source 2, right? And I can basically say no, use this other one, right? I can tell it to flip, and the reason that you do that is because there's also different, let's go ahead and use this one, that way we can get away from all of that. So basically if I'm gonna, and I can change the resolution, I can do full HD, I can do portrait. It really is nice. I do actually kind of appreciate this. And I can set the frame rate, because right now the frame rate it's whatever it thinks it can do. And so I end up getting with or going through video editing software, like I use Final Cut Pro, but go through video editing software and do that. I can change what audio I'm looking at. Yeah, all sorts of stuff, right? And where's now the last time I looked at this software, there it is. It's all the way at the bottom. There. Let's see what we get going on here. So when I say that it's kind of like OBS, if you don't know what OBS is, you don't necessarily need to worry about it. But what it does is it takes multiple sources of input, like the camera, the microphone, the display, all of that, and it feeds it through one piece of software that basically compiles it all together, right? And then turns that into an output source. And that's basically what it looks like Capture does. It also makes my skin look really splotchy, but that's okay. But basically down here, I was switching between different views and stuff like that. And you can see I can do sort of that same thing here. But I can't necessarily like change the sizes, which I can with OBS. That's OBS, that what you're staring at now. But anyway, I can't set I can't create new presets. The zoom still, okay, so the zoom in wow, that looks creepy as hell. The zoom in Logitech Capture works, but doesn't work over in G Hub or gaming software. And I can adjust the tilt and the pan and the zoom this way, which is all stuff that I should be able to do on both of those, the gaming software and the G Hub. And G Hub used to at least let me zoom in so that I could basically crop this out, and it would change the depth of field behind me a little bit. So I can turn autofocus on or off, but I can't change the focus. Right? So if I don't want autofocus on, I can't adjust the focus myself. And it's like, okay, well, why is that even an option, right? So from an experience design perspective and from a developer perspective, these are called feature toggles, right? So this is not actually implemented in such a way that a user, a beta user or not, can actually use this, right? So, you know, if autofocus is on, I get it. This slider gets disabled. My thing is that if I can't disable autofocus, just put a note here that says autofocus not enabled, you know, can't be disabled yet. There's auto white balance, which I can turn off, but I can't adjust the slider, right? So all that stuff that we did in the Logitech gaming software and the G Hub, we can't do here. Can I at least change the brightness? Yes, I can. And you can see that does pretty much what we would expect it to, where basically just all the pixels get turned up a little bit. And then there's the contrast. The contrast itself, you know, is basically adding gray. At least that's what it looks like it's just adding gray. Then there's this diamond this triangle thing that I don't know what it's supposed to do, and the slider doesn't move. So why is it there? And then we have, I don't even know what this is, saturation. Yeah. Right. So if we want to do black and white, we can just go there. Let's go ahead and do reset. We can turn on anti-flicker. You know, I'm not worried about anti-flicker because I don't do that. We can turn on chroma key. So if we want certain colors to disappear, we totally can. So I just made it blue. But if we make it green, there's not a lot of green in the shot. So then we go advanced settings, which is really just the ability to flip, right? Because in this mode, when I've got the face camera down in the bottom right hand corner, when I'm looking at the monitor, I want my eyes to lead you back into the main part of the view, and that's actually why I flip that view. And you know, we can also flip it upside down. So, you know, would you be prepared if gravity reversed itself? But yeah, and they have this record option, and you can take a photo. That's great. But the one thing they don't have, at least for the C922 Pro streaming camera, is the ability to adjust the camera, right? Which is the one thing I want to be able to do. And so, and also, last I checked, Logitech Capture software is still considered beta. I would say that as a developer, semantic versioning, if it's still considered a beta, that should not be a 2. That should be a 0, and this should be a 2. This 0 should be a 2. But anyway, so obviously I can't use that, right? We can't, I can't change anything. So good times. So I left that noise and basically went back to, you know, doing the gaming software. But seriously, looking at one, I can't change the size of this, but anyway, given this problem, right, where the sliders don't come up, and given this problem that I'm basically writing down what settings there are for which things, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go back to G Hub and just accept the fact that I can't get the both the FaceTime and the top down at the same time, which is pretty okay because at least this camera, or at least this software, sort of, has the profiles, the ability for me to turn, launch the software. And as long as I was on that profile, then it's going to be there and I can just quickly go, I really want to do the top down thing. So, oh, and there's also this sort of weird letterboxing thing that happens. And I do think that it's part of the Logitech gaming software. So I think, let's see if we, no, don't quit OBS. If we quit the G Hub, and let's switch to top down and then back. Yeah. So I think the only way for me to get that letterboxing off the sides is to go away, is to basically stop OBS and start it again. Let me go into here real quick though, because I do want to see if, yeah, so see, it can do the zooming now. Let's go into let's go back to Logitech gaming software. No. Right, because I'm trying to figure out, because it's so weird, right? When you're looking at this bottom right-hand side of the screen where I am, there's none of that letterboxing. But as soon as I go back to, oh, there we go. Okay, so I don't know what happened. I'm gonna do the whole like, don't touch it again because you'll break it. But that's the point, right? I like the Logitech hardware. This is a very small, lightweight camera. Very easy for me to travel with, so I can leave the face one there if I want to. So I can take this one with me, and if I wanted to, I'd have a little bit higher quality, but it doesn't take up as much space as something like my old Canon XTI from back in the day, right? And it's pretty nice. Again, it says it goes up to 1080. I always downsize or downscale everything to 720 anyway, just to try to conserve space. And I will say the microphones on here weren't horrible. Supposedly they're stereo microphones, but at the end of the day, I did decide to go ahead and pick up the microphone, and we'll probably have a video about the microphone. But yeah, these microphones seem to be okay. They do appear to have some type of noise cancellation. I wouldn't necessarily use them, but when it comes to video stuff, they're really good, as long as you can get the software to work and it does what you need it to do. So hopefully, I don't know if the objective, because basically what I mentioned to Logitech on Twitter is basically, it really feels like Logitech is a hardware company that has a separate software company that's in competition with itself, right? Because, and I also found out that apparently the C900 or the C920, anyway, one of the other cameras actually has its own software. Like, it has its own thing, like it comes with it, or you can download it specifically for that camera. And so it's not like the feeling that you get with something like Apple products, where basically, there's this hardware and then there's a piece of software that runs it, that allows me to do all the stuff, right? Or even an Android device or anything like that, where it's like, what I would expect or hope for is either there's a piece of software that handles all of the cameras, or each camera has its own dedicated piece of software to manipulate that specific piece of hardware. Given the nature of the beast and everything like that, what I suspect would end up happening, and I'm actually kind of hopeful for, would be that maybe Capture doesn't become the new thing, but that neumorphic style, neumorphic flat, white and vibrant saturated colors, sort of becomes the interface for G Hub and Logitech gaming software, which Logitech gaming software is apparently supposed to go away eventually anyway, at least from what I understand from support. And it's getting replaced by G Hub, which is odd because most people who stream do so for games, but they have Capture, which is what is being plugged with the new streaming camera, instead of, like, it just feels weird. Like, I can't describe it any other way. It just feels weird. Like, why all the different things? And I get from a certain respect, they are two different types of demographics, right? So with the streaming stuff, if you're more of an IRL streamer, like an in real life streamer, and that's what you're doing, yeah, just that kind of a thing, that makes a little bit more sense. G Hub, basically, when you look at it, it just screams gamer, right? Because it's like neon lighting, or LED lights, or faux LED lights, dark background, the whole nine, right? But you look at Capture and it's like, I don't know, it feels like I'm not saying this is with any disrespect whatsoever. I'm just saying it from a persona perspective. The person who comes to mind is somebody who like sells things on Etsy, that like their crafts on Etsy. That's what Capture seems to be more for. Or it's geared toward more a younger demographic, and maybe they're a little bit more into TikTok and things like that, but they want a better camera, but they're putting it on a platform that is traditionally like portrait mode instead of any type of a landscape or widescreen mode. Yeah, it feels interesting. But from an experience perspective, as a user, it feels like they create hardware, and there are other companies who create software that can manipulate that hardware, and all of those people creating software to manipulate the hardware are in competition with each other, right? Because the features aren't the same across the board. They're relatively close. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, right? I'd be interested to see like the code base for these things, because I'm wondering if it's almost like Adobe back in the day, right? Because if you looked at Adobe back in the day, you had like 6 million lines or something for Photoshop, and then like say 6 million lines for Illustrator, and most of that code could be centralized and said like, this is the way to do it, right? This is the canonical way to do it. Sean Parent gave a talk that kind of demonstrated it, or didn't kind of demonstrated it, it demonstrated it. So anyway, with that said, this is where we are. Because I just switched back over to using G Hub, I'm going to see how painful it is. And then, because I appreciate the cameras from the perspective that I can set them up. The quality seems better than the webcam here, right? That does like 720. It seems to be more flexible for the top downs and the face, right? Like, it seems decent enough, and the hardware is not the problem, but the software was definitely the problem, and I'm going to sort of see how it feels, just because that's what this channel is about, right? It's not about unboxing and reviewing a product, once that I played with for a week. No disrespect for people who do that. That's their gig. That's what they do. I'm going to use this for a while, and I'm going to keep upgrading it, and eventually we might end up with a mirrorless camera. We might end up with, mirrorless camera plus, something else. I don't know. But right now, this is the setup. And this is the experience with that setup. So there you go. So far, G Hub seems to be pretty okay. Like, I literally just today I did a top down of some leather work. P.S. I'm getting into leather work, so check it out. That's some stitching that I did, or that I'm practicing. But I did some top-down stuff with that, and setting up the profile seemed really nice. The issue that I ran into there is that I can't have the top down be really high, and I can't zoom, right? Even if I wanted to. So I'm going to have to keep messing around with that to see how that works. Or at least I can't consistently zoom. Let's put it that way. And so now that this video is shot, I'm probably going to remove the other two software applications and just have G Hub on here. But getting that set up, and I literally set up the profile for this right before I started shooting. So the hope is that I can just plug this in, do what I need to do, and not have to deal with the cards and sliding things around and making adjustments all the time. So anyway, with that said, as always, thank you so much for making the time. I definitely do appreciate it, and I'll see you around.